if you're married to a whale, so you know. Anyway, now Dad didn't tell us much about the stories from the old days, but 10 years ago, when my son Daniel, he had to, for a school project, interview somebody. Now I know you people who are, I'm not a grandparent yet, but you people who are grandparents, I don't care what kind of parent you are, as a grandparent, you're pushovers, right? So you're much more indulgent to the grandchildren than you are. So he wanted his grandson to get a good grade. So he told us a lot of the old stories. So Daniel wrote, my grandfather, George Wales, was born in 1926 in Millerton. He was the 12th child of 16 children. Growing up in the Great Depression, his father, William, now if you think, those of you who are young or if you've read anything about the Great Depression, was a time of economic disaster. Many people losing their jobs, many people going without food lines, soup lines. William was milking 75 cows. Well, he had a lot of kids to help with that. Now, William's father, Blake Wales, this is according to my dad, received land as part of the Pennsylvania Homestead Act. At that time, they were still giving away land. 10 acres and a mule, or 20 acres and 2 mules, if you would farm it. In 1888, this is my dad's grandfather, he accompanied the sheriff to a dispute. There was a boundary dispute. So one guy, this is where my land starts, there's an argument. So my dad's grandfather, Blake, was shot and killed with 2 shots from a revolver. So now these are in the days there's no welfare system. William, my dad's father, was 11 years old, the oldest. He went to work. He went to work on the farm and in the woods. So you think about 11 years old, going to work to support the family. He did not have much of a childhood, like what we know as childhood. So the thing you always say about whales is they are very hard workers. And you can see where that started. My dad said at age 3, do you have any kids here who are 3 years old or close? Right there. At age 3, he was given his first chore. They gave him a stick, and it was his job to make sure the cows came in from the field into the barn with a stick. 3 years old. At 6 years old, he had to milk 6 cows. And that was no milkers, just by hand. And so I always saw my dad, I mean, he was strong. I can remember me and Tommy being little, said, Dad, pick us up, pick us up. He took one like this and held us. And I remember thinking, I think he's strong as Superman. But then we thought he should do that every day. He's like, no, he doesn't have time to do that. But he was strong. He had forearms like power. But he was tough. So my dad said he remembered thinking he did not understand why he had to milk 6 cows when he had that many brothers and sisters. There was no, he remembered having a car, but there was no electricity or running water on the farm until 1937. So he said, Dad, what did you eat as a kid? Cornmeal mush for breakfast, cornmeal mush for lunch, Johnny cake for supper. If you don't know what Johnny cake is, cornmeal baked. So if you didn't like cornmeal, you were out of luck. Once in a while, he said there would be some meat, but in the Great Depression, so Dan asked him, did you get enough to eat? Oh yeah, we always got plenty to eat. It was always cornmeal mush, but we got plenty to eat. And this is the way he was taught, say bedtime prayers, the same one he taught us before bed to pray, Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. But he was wounded in the war and had a very sensitive stomach. So a lot of times he had stomach problems, couldn't eat certain things. But he used to sit at the table and say, if I should die before I wake, you'll know I died of a stomach ache. So George walked to a one-room schoolhouse. He wore knickers that went down to his knees and long socks. There was one teacher and 36 kids from grades 1 through 6. I want to say something about, I don't know how they got a 3-year-old to lead those cows in. Now, I'm a teacher. We can't get 25 6-year-olds to line up to the bathroom. How? That was amazing. But, now, if he was in school, if he was bad, the punishment was he had to sit between 2 of the big girls. And George, did you like school? Yeah, it was a break from the farm work. He loved to go to school. He says he does not remember doing anything as a kid except work. And so it did not, the Great Depression, there was survival, but I think Tom and I heard, and I'm sure all of us heard over and over again. Now, he taught it, he made us do chores, but we would say, can we help with the milking? He would say, you go play. He said, you're going to be working your whole life, and someday you'll wish you had played. And I think he wanted us to have what he could not have. That was the kind of person he was. And the same way with music. I remember Mom taking me to buy my first guitar, and I said, it was $125. I said, you think Dad's going to be okay with us spending that much money? She said he never hesitates, because I didn't know this, but he one time bought a guitar himself and thought he could learn to play it. But his hands were so sore that he couldn't do the strings. So, I mean, he wanted us to have what he could not have. He was 18 years old in 1944, and he enlisted in the Marines. He said, what is boot camp like? He said, piece of cake. Compared to working on the farm, he says, guys all around me huffing and puffing. He said, I don't think it's that bad. He remembers a drill sergeant tapping him on the head with a stick. Inspections all the time, always someone to answer to. Then there's the famous story of how he passed his swim test. But he did not talk a lot about the war. And I've learned most of what I know about. He was in the Battle of Okinawa. That was the final battle with the Japanese in World War II. And it was the most bloody battle of the Pacific. It was terrible. The Japanese mentality at that time was kamikaze. They said, you're going to die, but this is your mission. Before you die, kill as many Americans as you can. So they said to get the Army and the Marines on the boats to go to Okinawa, and they said, you can expect that 80% of you are going to die on the shore. Good pep talk, right? However, it was the strangest thing. They got to the shore, no one there. But they were all dug in. They had an intricate system of underground tunnels. And Dad said they crawled on their stomachs across volcanic rock, inch by inch. And he never talked that much about it, but he did have hard feelings towards the Japanese. He says, I sure am glad I fought on foreign soil and have shrapnel in my body so that all my kids could come home driving Japanese cars. He said, Dad, we're not enemies anymore. But he, at one time, talked about some of the things he saw. That atrocities that you just don't get over seeing that kind of thing. And I won't say because there's small children here, but it was pretty bad. So he was wounded by what's called a tin can. They would take a tin can, put a grenade in it, lots of nails and metal, just whatever, just so that they would throw it, and it exploded. So my dad was wounded everywhere, his arm, his stomach, his leg. So he was wounded in World War II, and he told us when Daniel talked to him, that, of course, this is the most stressful time of his life, but he said there's no bones about it. God helped him to get through it. And he had a faith in God, and I know he told my mom that he did not fear death, because some of the guys around him were freaking out, afraid he might die. But if we're going to talk about what kind of man my dad was, you can't say it without saying he believed in God, and he had a faith. Now, he wasn't one to go and talk about theological doctrines or whatever, but he had a simple belief in God and the basics, and this is what he believed. Now, he was a good man, but he did not believe you go to heaven because you're a good man. You go to heaven because you have faith in what Jesus did. And that's what he believed. He said, if I die, I know where I'm going. And he was still saying the same thing a week before he died. And but he said, he would say often, Andy, do you believe in predestination? I said, Dad, do you really want to open that can of worms? We have a family debate about that. But this is what he meant by it. There's a verse in the Bible that says, it is appointed unto man once to die, and after this the judgment. He said, I have an appointment. I can't make it one day sooner, and I can't make it one day later. He said, when my number's up, my number's up. So, getting back to, so he was injured quite badly, but the corpsmen, what they called their medics, there were some a lot worse off than him, so he had to lay there all night. And he said to us, nobody told me I couldn't drink water. He lay there all night drinking water, and gangrene set in. They had to remove 10 feet of his intestines. This is another one of his stories. Like, he wanted to share the stories in a way that would be a funny story. So he said, did I ever tell you that when I was wounded in the war, that I sat on the corpsman's shoulders and held his hair out of his eyes while he was putting the tube in my stomach? And I said, what? He said, well, have you ever heard of an out-of-body experience? I said, yeah, I guess that could happen. He said, well, I know it happened. So and I believe this is true, he had an out-of-body experience, and he was aware that they were operating on him, but he knew that God kept him alive for a reason. So, now once the war was over, well, before we get to that, so my dad is recuperating in the hospital, and he's never been one to sit still for very long. So, he had a friend in the hospital, they called him Hooky, because he had a hook. So Hooky said, they're not very known for their sensitivity. So Hooky said he's going to go to a show. So my dad says, I want to go too. The nurse said, no, you haven't recovered enough, you can't go. So he snuck out. And they went to a show. I don't know if it was a movie or some kind of USO show. So there were her